people. How are you going? I'm just going to look for my page so I can see you guys. And then we're going to start the show. How's that? All right. Okay. Thanks for bearing with us. And we're going to do that. This is such a weird setup that they have here, but I'm hoping that this is going to work for me, because I like to see us when we do this. Okay, there we are. Now I can see us. Great, good job. Okay, well, hello again. Welcome to Frankie Sense and More. I am your host, Frankie Picasso. It's just a little bit 1:05 p.m. on Tuesday, and I'm so glad that you guys have joined us. His music has been called the most heavenly healing music on the planet, and with over 20,000 healers and healing centers using his music daily, he has sold over 1 million copies of his songs. Wow. 2011, he started to paint, has now sold his paintings at the biggest art festivals in the United States, including Coconut Grove in Miami, Lincoln Center in New York, and Ann Arbor, Michigan, to name a few. And his paintings are now available also in galleries and with art collectors. My guest is a multifaceted musician, artist, whose career developed into meditation events in 2015. He's also the author of 4 books, and his latest, The True Story of Jesus and His Wife, Mary Magdalena, has maybe been the most controversial, given that this is not a religious book, and my guest is not a Christian. He does, however, have a fascinating story to tell, and how all of this came to be. Please welcome David Young. Hello, David, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Frankie.
It is a real pleasure to have you here. This book it's not the first time I've heard this. And actually, I read an author, Kathleen McGowan. She wrote, I think, 3 books on the topic of Jesus being married to Mary Magdalene. She did it as fiction. She's a devout Catholic. She did it as a fictional because she didn't want to have, I guess, all of the controversy, I guess, backlash, or whatever you want to call it, from the ultra-rights Christians. But she actually made me fall in love with Jesus. And like yourself, I'm a Jew.
Yeah, I was brought up Jewish. Once I was bar mitzvahed at 13, I really wasn't involved with it very much at all.
Yeah.
And honestly, I really wouldn't. I'm 58, and I really, even though I was born Jewish, I was not a follower of the Jewish religion. And I studied meditation, so I really didn't associate myself with Judaism. But then again, I think Jesus did the same thing, where he was born Jewish, he was bar mitzvahed.
Right.
And at a certain point, he started getting interested in spirituality, and what the benefits were.
Right.
Of really living a spiritual path instead of just reading and following a book. Like in his time, it was the Old Testament that was already 1,500 years old. You know, he wanted to have a more active spiritual life, being involved with, having his own experiences with God, like the same way that many people want to have their own experiences with God.
I'm trying to get us on our page here. There we go. Sorry, David. I had to, I'm just trying to get us back onto our Facebook so I can see if anybody wants to talk to us. This new setup is just a real pain in the butt. Yeah, like yourself, I mean, I stopped engaging in the religion around 12, and I just felt that for myself that I could be closer to God in a cornfield or something than I could in a synagogue with people. I just felt that they just wanted to be seen and not really heard.
Yeah. Sure.
You know, but it's an interesting concept how you got involved with this, and I mean, you were painting these gorgeous paintings in 2011. I think you're 2015 you started those. Is that right?
Well, I painted in 2011, 12 a little bit. I made some paintings then, and then I stopped because I was doing all these meditation events all over the place. And then about a year after I started doing these meditation events, after about 500 people had shared that they had an experience during the meditation while I was playing the flute, 500 people shared that their mom, their dad, their grandmother, somebody who they loved from childhood who died young, people had reconnected with them at the events where I was playing the flute, and I didn't even know that was possible. I'd been meditating for 30 years at that point. I'd experienced the purple light and the white light, sometimes the blue light, but I'd never had a channeling experience where I actually reconnected with somebody who I loved in the heavenly dimension. And honestly, I didn't even think that was possible. When the first couple of people started sharing this at my events, I could hardly believe it.
So
You know?
you've had over 450 events, and 7,000 people have conversations with Jesus, with Kwan Yin, with Buddha, with all of these, spiritual masters, and the trigger has been your music, or the gateway has been your
Yeah.
music, which is just absolutely fascinating.
I'm sure if you were a musician playing in front of an audience, expecting people to get relaxed, I'm sure you would be really surprised. Like going back to, I started doing these events in 2014, and channeling was not talked about so openly as it is now in 2019. That was 5 years ago. A lot has changed in the last 5 years regarding that. And so I was just amazed that people were sharing these experiences, and I was amazed by the consistency of what people were sharing. Because, if I did these events 3 or 4 nights a week, pretty much every week, maybe I'd take 1 week or 2 weeks off. And that's how I just did my 478th event.
Wow.
That I just did. I'm gonna hit 500 events by the time I get to New Year's this year. But so just
you do a
imagine,
share at the end of your playing, you do a share and say, hey, did anybody come up for anything? Yeah.
Absolutely. I played for about 25, 30 minutes. People are gone after the first 2 minutes. They are completely out of their body. They're out of their physical consciousness into their higher consciousness, or what I call their higher intelligence, which is also known as their soul.
Yeah.
And when people, I do the music at the national conventions for people who've had near-death experiences, and people who have had near-death experiences, when they come to my event, they always share that the closest thing they ever heard to that heavenly music that they heard when they were in the heavenly dimension during their near-death experience.
And what about you when you're playing? What do you feel?
Well, I feel the energy without a doubt. I don't have the visions that people are having because I'm playing 2 flutes at one time. I have to be in my body to be playing the 2 flutes and adjusting the different sound effects, and I have to be in my body, but I definitely can feel the energy, and I can see when one of the ascended masters, it appears to people just because they use a different color-coded system with a light that they use. So I can tell when it's Saint Germain because it's always that fiery red color that appears over someone's head. I can tell when it's Jesus or Mother Mary because they use that blue color. I can tell it's Buddha because he uses that orange color, similar to like the orange robes that a Buddhist monk wears.
Right. Yeah.
So
like
over time, I've been able to get
to
that
recognize.
Recognize who's appearing to who. But when people are having these experiences, I don't know what the details are. If there's 20 or 30 or 40 people in a room, how could I possibly know?
And so when they say, hey, I just saw Jesus for the first time, and guess what he told me? Are they having a consistent message, or is everybody getting a different message? Or like, is there a commonality to the messages?
Well, he tells a lot of people, I did not create Christianity.
Well, we knew that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a very consistent message that he tells people. And very often the reason why he's appearing to people is either to connect them with one of their loved ones in heaven, because he knows his way around heaven really good.
Yeah.
And so he connects people to their moms or their grandmothers or somebody who they love that is really important for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes he gives people a healing because, if somebody needs a healing, that's a highest priority, because if someone's living in pain,
Yeah.
But he's not the only person who appears to people. Buddha appears to people, and Kwan Yin, and Isis, and Gandhi, and all kinds of people. I used to think that the Ascended Masters, the spiritual masters, were like the only people who worked with people on a human level.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the case at all, because all kinds of people who have been an inspiration to others, like Gandhi, for example, or
Mm-hmm.
like Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King appeared to this woman in Syracuse and told this woman on a Friday night that he had work for her to do in 2 or 3 days. In 2 to 3 days. And this woman shared that in front of 40 people at my event. That was on a Friday night. 2.5 days later, on Monday morning, she posted on my Facebook page that her boss called her into his office on Monday morning and put her in charge of the Martin Luther King Fund at her company. And she didn't know there was a Martin Luther King Fund at her company.
How amazing is that?
You know what that's called?
That's synchronicity.
Well, yeah, you can call it synchronicity. I call it normal, because that stuff happens at my events
Right.
every single night.
That's amazing.
Yeah, at another event, there was a woman who was a friend of mine who has stage 4 cancer. And her doctors don't even know how she's still alive with the serious cancer that she has. And she was barely able to walk into the event where she came to, where I was, doing one of my Portal Between Heaven and Earth events. And her lip was bleeding because she fell on the way in, because her body was so weak she couldn't barely even walk. And she called me up 3 days later and said for the 48 hours after her event that she came to, she had, well, before the event, she was in 10 out of 10, the worst pain in the world. And she came to the event and she called me up 2 days later and said she was completely pain-free for 48 hours.
Wow.
From the worst pain in the world to being completely pain-free.
Did she meet somebody at your event, or she just was healed?
Well, Jesus and Mother Mary, and if you want to know the truth, John Lennon and George Harrison were with them at the same time.
That's cool.
John and George are very close to Jesus, not in a religious way. Believe me, they're not Christians in any way, okay? Mm-hmm. Because George and John both studied all kinds of Indian philosophy and meditation.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see them actually bringing everybody into the 5th dimension, because, leading them in, because it's a heart-centered energy that they both have.
Yeah, but the 5th dimension, that was a different band. That was a joke.
No, I know. So, okay. I think the story of how you came to be is fascinating as well. Not that I think it's really cool, because I'm a spiritual hypnotherapist. So I did past lives. I get all of this stuff. But a lot of people, they're not believers. They don't believe in it, see me. And I don't know, did you ever meet, because you did the NDE events, Dr. Phyllis Atwater, did you ever meet her, PMS? She
have like 3,
like 10 books.
Three letters in her name? It's like PMS Atwater.
Yes.
Yeah, I know her. I've met her a bunch of times.
I'm sure you have. Yeah, because she wrote the big book on near-death experiences when she interviewed over 4,000 people that had NDEs. So, she's a fascinating lady. But I thought you might have met her at one of those. But she talks about, after you've had an NDE, you come back a little more detached from humanity, but with a greater love for everybody, but definitely more intuitive, psychic, whatever.
And no fear of death.
Yeah,
people who've had near-death experiences, they're not afraid to die anymore, because they know it's a party up there. It's an upgrade.
Well, you see who you expect to see, usually. Unless, sometimes you don't. Sometimes it can be a little bit scary for some people, but generally speaking, you see who you expect to see, and maybe that's, who people see. But I'm wondering, have people seen, let's say, Jesus at your event who don't believe in Jesus?
Oh, absolutely. That's
really
the funniest part of everything.
Yeah.
Like, people will, if the meditation ends and I see somebody in the audience with this really, really confused look, like, what the heck was all that about? I know what they're going to share even before they share it. That's a Jewish person who just got visited by Mother Mary or Jesus, and they're wondering, what was that about? Why in the world would they appear to me if I'm Jewish?
Yeah.
But the thing is that if a person is Jewish in this lifetime, that doesn't mean that they're Jewish in every lifetime. That's not realistic, and we've all lived so many lives. It's like, it's barely counted. You can't count how many lifetimes we've all lived, because it's too many to even get into a realm of counting. you know. But the Ascended Masters, they don't care what religion you are right now.
Right.
Okay? Because once we all transition, or die is the word that most people use for it. Once we die, we transition and we get into the oneness, because everything in the heavenly dimension is connected. It's all connected by this oneness. And whatever you put your attention on, that is what you see. So if you're in heaven and you think about your grandmother, well then, boom, a second later, your grandmother appears to you. Or if you think about Buddha or Krishna or Moses or Jesus or any of them, a second later, they are going to appear to you. Because what in the heavenly dimension, there's no difference between your imagination and
Right.
reality. In the physical dimension, there's a difference between your imagination and reality. But in the heavenly dimension, whatever you imagine,
It just manifested faster there.
it manifests instantly as reality, because the reason why it manifests faster is because our physical bodies are made out of cells and molecules. And in this physical dimension, it takes time for your cells and molecules to transform. But in the heavenly dimension, our bodies are made out of light. And everything in the spiritual dimension manifests at the speed of light. So you think about your grandmother, and a second later, at the speed of light, your grandmother appears in front of you. You know, whoever you think about manifests right there, right then, because everything manifests instantly in the heavenly dimension, because it's all made out of light, and light is so much easier to transform than our physical molecules.
Let's talk about the book. Okay. You were told by a friend that you were going to write a book.
Yeah.
And you go, is it a music book? Because I've already been there, done that. Don't really care to do another one.
Yeah.
And what did they tell you?
Well, Jesus kept appearing to people at my events and telling them that I was give David a message. When is he going to get working on this book? And because I was doing these events 3-4 nights a week. I mean, sometimes I did 15 events in a row, 15 days in a row in different places. And because I was working so hard and living this stuff so much on my days off, I didn't want to be working on a book about the same things that I'm doing the events about. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's nice to have a little break. So this way, you know, man, my events are 3 hours. You know, they include a half-hour introduction, a half-hour meditation, then 20 minutes of sharing, then a little stretch break, and then another half-hour meditation. And
is that a guided meditation? Sorry, are they guided meditations? They are.
I have 3 or 4 different guided meditations that I do.
Okay.
And sometimes the second meditation, I won't do any guiding at all, and I'll just let the guidance be in the first meditation. And then when I'm done guiding people, that's when I start playing the flute. And there's some people who have said that from the first second, that sound of the flute comes out, they were instantly projected out of their body up into the heavenly realm.
Okay.
But when these people were telling me that, you know, Jesus wants to know when you're going to get working on that book, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the last thing I want to think about on one of my days off. And so eventually,
enough.
Yeah. And the other thing that was a real absolute motivator was that I started painting again in 2016 and 2017. And I made 150 paintings, of which 50 of those paintings ended up being in the book, because I made these paintings a year or 2 years before I went to the south of France, because Jesus told my ex-girlfriend, who was an amazing channeler, her name was Mimi.
It still is Mimi.
It still is Mimi, yeah, you know. And she's an amazing, amazing person, you know. He told her, because she was channeling him every day, because he was giving me more and more information, that he wanted to be part of the book. And he told us that he wanted us to go to the south of France, to the cave of Mary Magdalena, and to the Basilica of Saint Mary Magdalene. And this is an amazing story that's part of history, that's not anybody's channeled information. It's in the history books. So what happened was that in the year 1279, a French nobleman was visited in a dream by Mary Magdalene, and Mary Magdalene told this French nobleman that her bones were buried in a box under a church in a little village called Saint Maximin in the south of France. Well, that dream was so powerful that this French nobleman took a crew down to the south of France and found this little church in the village of Saint Maximin. He went under the church and found a wooden box, and when he opened up that box, he could see there were human bones in this box, and there was a handwritten letter that said, "Here lie the bones of Saint Mary Magdalene." He built a giant church over that little village church, which became known as the Basilica of Saint Mary Magdalene. And they changed the name of the town in 1279 to Saint Maximin les Saint Baume. And Baume in French means cave, because it's Saint Maximin of the saints' bones, because Mary Magdalene lived in a cave nearby. And, you know, that's the true story of what happened. But what most people don't realize is that Mary Magdalene did not live in that cave by herself. Mary Magdalene lived in that cave with her husband, whose name was Yeshua, who later became known as Jesus. Once Christianity changed his name from one language into another language, eventually he became known as Jesus, but the name he was born with was Yeshua. Now, everybody knows Jesus was Jewish, okay? But most people don't realize that he was a rabbi. And there are 5 places in the Bible where he's called rabbi, because back in the day, 2,000 years ago, it was expected of a rabbi to have a wife and children. That was the prerequisite before a person could become a rabbi. Jesus was a rabbi, and his wife's name was Mary Magdalene, and they had 3 children together from the time he was 30 to 33 years old when he came back to Israel after studying in Egypt at the mystery schools of Egypt, and studied from the yogis and the gurus in India. If you look at the book, but you look up any map on the internet, you can see how close Egypt is to Israel. It's right next to it. The only thing separating it is the Red Sea. And that was the first place where Jesus traveled to study and learn about spirituality, because he was a seeker, the same way that you and I are seekers, in the same way that there are millions of people out there who are seekers. After studying in Egypt, he took a boat as a crewman on a sailing ship down the Red Sea and then across to India, where he studied from the yogis and gurus in India. Now, when he comes back, he's 30 years old, and Mother Mary introduces him to Mary Magdalene at a wedding. Okay, Mary Magdalene's mother had died young, so Mother Mary had become kind of like an adopted mom to Mary Magdalene. Because Mary Magdalene's mother had died young, and because her father was the wealthiest man in that whole region, her father was Joseph of Arimathea in the Bible. Now, the last place Jesus is seen in the Bible is at the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. The last person in the Bible who sees Jesus is Mary Magdalene. That's because she was visiting him while he was in a coma in her father's tomb. Most people back then didn't even have a shovel, let alone their own tomb, but because Joseph of Arimathea was so wealthy, he had his own tomb. After his son-in-law was crucified and was taken down off the cross after 6 hours, because there was a Roman law that stated a Hebrew person could not be tortured over a Hebrew holiday. So because he was tortured on the day before Passover, his body was taken down off the cross at sundown, because that is when the Jewish holiday of Passover starts.
So a lot of people would say to you, but he was stabbed to make sure he was killed.
Mm-hmm.
Did they address this?
Doesn't matter if they addressed it or not. He survived it. He survived it, and he made his way with Mary Magdalene because she saved his life. Mm-hmm. One of the things in the book that people don't realize is that when he was taken down from the cross by a Roman soldier who was sympathetic about what was happening to him, and this Roman soldier was friends with Mary Magdalene. That's why they put him in Mary Magdalene's father's tomb. And this Roman soldier let Mary Magdalene into the tomb each day to change the bandages on his hands and on his feet and on his rib. He was in a coma. He was having a near-death experience. Like, if anybody experienced that, they would most likely go into shock and go into a coma. The difference between Jesus and the other 2 people who were crucified that day, the other 2 people who were crucified were not taken down off the cross and put into Joseph of Arimathea's tomb for two reasons. Number one, they weren't Jewish. And number two, Joseph of Arimathea was not their father-in-law. So after 3 days of him being in that tomb and Mary Magdalene coming in each day to change the bandages on his hands and his feet and his rib with the help of her sister, Martha, okay, on the third day, this Roman soldier brought a wooden cart that was covered by hay, and it was pulled by a horse. The Roman soldier takes Jesus' body out of that tomb and puts his body in the center of that wooden cart, and he covers up his body with hay. So now it just looks like a wooden cart that's covered by hay that's being pulled by a horse. Mary Magdalene drives the horse, rides the horse, and that's how he escaped. Okay.
But wait, did you and Mimi ask questions? Did you go, oh, but what about this and what about that? Did you either of you ask him questions?
Of course.
So why was Mary portrayed as a prostitute?
Because everybody back then, their name was Mary. It was the most popular name of everybody, female people in the Middle East who were Jewish. If you went to Brooklyn, how many Joeys would you meet in Brooklyn? I grew up in Brooklyn. Every other guy you meet in Brooklyn, his name is Joey.
Mary I don't think I've ever met a Mary Jewish person.
Well, back in the day, Miriam was,
Miriam,
Miriam, and so Mary Magdalene said it was another Mary. Because if you look in the Bible, Mary Magdalene is separated all the time as Mary Magdalene.
Yes, she is.
The Mary in the Bible that they talked about that was a prostitute, they don't say she's Mary Magdalene. Now, I got to tell you something. You talk about people who have a relationship with Jesus. Now, I didn't have a relationship with him up until a couple of years ago when he started appearing at my events because of my Jewish background. You couldn't talk to me about Jesus because I wasn't interested in Jesus at all, not a little bit. Forget it. Don't talk to me about that because I just don't believe that story. There was nothing in me that resonated with that story that he was the only son of God and that somehow he disappeared magically. Really, it's not chemically or biologically possible for a human being to disappear. If it was, there'd be people in trouble disappearing all the time. It's not possible. And so what he said to me through Mimi was that they put in the Bible, they added it to the Bible, that he said to the apostles, I'm going to prepare a place for you. He wasn't preparing anything for anyone. He was trying to hold on to his life because he had been tortured for 6 hours. He was not in a position to be helping anybody. He was trying to stay alive, and his wife was trying to keep him alive. Okay? So when I go see a movie, whoever saves the good guy is the hero. Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
Well, if Mary Magdalene saved him, then she is the hero.
Right.
And anybody who says that they have a close relationship with Jesus, but doesn't know that he has a wife who appears with him all the time, they obviously don't know him that well. Because if they knew him that well, they would know he has a wife. Because all of my close friends that are the most important people in my life, I know if they're married or not. If a Christian person says that they have a relationship with Jesus and they don't know he was married, and that he was a father of their children, they obviously don't know him that well.
Most people don't believe he was married, and most people don't believe he had children, and most people, and so why would all of that, and I understand, the Bible's written by a gazillion people, but why specifically would that information be excluded from the history books?
There's a couple of reasons, but before we get to that, we should talk about the virgin birth, because that's something that has to get settled right off the bat.
Okay.
Before Jesus was born, there were 5 other religions that all had a virgin birth in their religion. Dionysus was one of them. Mithra was one of them. Horus was another one, and I can never remember the other 2 guys.
Yeah.
But all 3 of those, Dionysus, Mithraism, and Horus, who was an Egyptian god, and Isis was his mother. Okay, they all had supposedly a virgin birth. There were supposedly 3 wise men that appeared to his mom at his birth. There was supposedly a special star that appeared in the sky at the same time of their birth. All 3 of them, who were born thousands of years before Jesus was ever a thought at all.
Yeah.
All of them, all of their birthdays were December 25th. December 25th was a holiday. In the first 380 years of Christianity, there was no virgin birth in the Bible. The virgin birth was added to the Bible in 381 by Emperor Constantine during the Council of Nicaea, which was a council that the emperor of the Roman Empire called because there were all these fights and riots breaking out because some people believed that Jesus was born God, and other people believed that he was born a man who became godlike, and eventually God adopted him. So Emperor Constantine wanted to stop all of these riots all over the Roman Empire with people fighting and killing each other over whether Jesus was God or whether he was born a man. And during that Council of Nicaea, they took things out of the Bible that were confusing people, like, well, how come he has brothers and sisters if he's the only son of God? That's a pretty big question, right?
Yeah.
And they added things to the Bible to strengthen their story. And so this way, Mithraism and the religion about Dionysus and the religion about Horus, they didn't want those religions to look cooler than Christianity because those religions had a virgin birth. And Christianity did not have a virgin birth the first 380 years. So Emperor Constantine made Mother Mary a virgin 381 years later, and that's the first time the virgin birth is added to the Bible. People have to understand that that's not somebody's opinion. That's a historical record when the virgin birth was added to the Bible. If I was a Christian, I'd want to know that, because the whole basis of the Christian religion is based on a virgin birth that was just added to the Bible 381 years later. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing about Mary Magdalene, there are copyright laws. There are actually copyright laws. And if Mary Magdalene would have been named as his wife, that would mean that she would own a part of the copyrights of the Bible. Now, the whole thing with priests not being able to marry, priests were able to marry for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Priests had wives and children, and the only reason why they decided to make priests not be able to marry is because when a priest died, his land and his money were inherited by his wife and his children. The Catholic Church only made it a law that a priest couldn't marry. So this way, their land and their money would not be inherited by their children, and their land and their money that the priest would pass on would go directly to the church and not to their family. And that's the only reason why priests are not allowed to marry. And can you even imagine the karmic effect of that over the last 1800 years?
So David, just a fascinating story. You know, some people will believe it, others won't. This was channeled and given to you. Jesus told you this story, and Mary together told you that through Mimi, right?
Yep.
And corroborated really by your paintings, because the paintings that you had done 2 years before was a big puzzle piece that actually was showing the story. But
yeah,
you know,
I was making these abstract paintings. I thought I was making these paintings of a cave and this mountain. I didn't know why I was painting all these things in a cave, and I didn't grow up in a cave. I didn't grow up in the mountains. I have no connection to caves or mountains.
Right.
And then after I went to the south of France and I went to the cave of Mary Magdalene, I could see how all this stuff had come together and how I had painted where they lived together.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Did it freak you out?
Mind blowing.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, I never thought these. I thought these were abstract paintings. I didn't know they were connected to where Jesus and Mary Magdalene lived 2,000 years ago.
Hi, Himinesh. Thanks for joining us. It's an absolutely fascinating tale. Now, you've written this book. Do you have the book near you?
Yeah, I can get one. Hold on a sec.
I just want to show folks the cover and some of the artwork in there, because it is beautiful. And your music is in there too. And as I read the book, each chapter and every couple of pages, I played the music. I guess that's as you intended it to be. And it was beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, the book includes 90 minutes of music. There's 12 QR codes that you scan with your phone.
Yeah.
This would be a little tricky for me to get my camera like this to show you what the QR code is.
It is.
Okay, here's a QR code over here. Can you see that?
Yep. We can.
Okay, so
Show us a painting. Just show us a picture of a painting, or this. You got a page where you're standing by your artwork in a gallery.
well, actually, I want to show this painting.
Okay.
Okay, this is called The White River to the Golden Mountains. Can you see it?
Yes, kind of. It's
Can
a
you see
little.
the title on the bottom?
Yes. Yeah, that we can see.
Okay, here is the painting. I made this painting 2 years before I knew that Jesus and Mary Magdalena lived in the mountainous region of the south of France, not too far from where the Grand Canyon of France is. I made this painting, and then while I was in France, Jesus told Mimi they followed the river north to get to France, where they lived out the rest of their lives.
Wow. Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. So this book has been out for how long now?
Well, let's see. I came out in February.
Okay. And I
It's
have
an
to.
audio book. It's an audio book with me narrating the story. It's also an ebook, and it's in English and it's in Spanish. And you can get both of those either on Amazon or on my website, davidyoungmusic.com.
It's an absolutely gorgeous book. I'm going to say that. I think I can't believe the price of it, really, because the color and the artwork, and I'm an artist myself, so I know what putting a book out like that is, incredible. Yeah, absolutely,
it's just
stunning.
It's a big coffee table book. It's 13 inches by 10 inches. So it really, it's kind of like a transmitter of their energy in the form of light, in the form of the paintings, and sound because of the music that comes along with the book.
But the story that you tell has to rub up against some people. They have to think, man, you're a heretic. Like, you are like out to lunch. And are you receiving any kind of threats or anything from people?
Well, the way I describe this is that it's almost like we have two countries living in the same country in America. Because if you turn on CNN and then watch that for 5 minutes and turn on Fox News for 5 minutes, you can't even believe that they're talking about the same things, because they're talking about the exact opposite things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So likewise, somebody who is a born-again Christian will not ever walk into a metaphysical bookstore or a yoga studio. And similarly, people who go to metaphysical bookstores and meditate and go to yoga studios will not ever walk into a born-again Christian church. And so the two cultures exist at the same time. So I only do events at places that are sponsored by metaphysical bookstores and yoga studios or wellness centers. And so the only people who go to those people are open-minded people who meditate. And this doesn't sound so weird to them. Right. Because these people are having their own experiences. So at this point, before the movie comes out, we just finished the screenplay for the movie, and the movie will be called Sacred Love.
Nice.
And so once that comes out, that's going to change a lot of things. I don't think I'm going to be able to continue to do these events 3-4 nights a week all over the place, just because at that point I don't know if that'll be a feasible thing for me to do. But I really haven't got a hard time from anybody, because I have to tell you something. Our society is based on logic. Our intelligence is based on logic. So I find it incredible that certain people can't talk about near-death experiences, NDEs, because it sounds too woo-woo. It does not sound logical to them.
Yes.
Those same people cannot talk about an out-of-body experience or a meditative experience, because that's too woo-woo. It's not comfortable for them. It doesn't sound logical to them. But those same people can believe that a guy just disappeared into thin air. Just disappeared. Can you imagine telling your boss at your office, I'm sorry, but my coworker just disappeared? Can you imagine that? Who in the world would ever say in public, somebody disappeared?
I know. I get where you're coming from. But the belief system for those who are really into religion is so strong. I mean, I've had people say, well, they wouldn't lie.
Right? Oh, really?
They wouldn't lie.
The virgin birth is a lie.
Yes. No, I get it. But their belief system is, you know, as a matter of fact, I mean, all we have to do is look at racism. I mean, there was a documentary on racism where you know, this white guy was telling this black person, well, Jesus, you know, Jesus has to hate you because, you know, he wouldn't. And it's like, is that what Jesus is about? Jesus is about love. Jesus is about loving everybody. He's not about hate and racism. But in Jesus's name, they're using his name to hate people. I mean, it's ridiculous,
Hey, you know what?
incredible.
It said, one of the things it says in the Bible, it says you shouldn't judge people or else you'll be judged.
Exactly.
You know, that is the exact opposite of what goes on in the world in his name.
This is true.
Can
And
you
this is why
imagine?
this is why people, you know, Christianity gets a bad rap from people like
Right.
myself, because
Well,
they really don't, they don't know what they're about. They really don't understand that their leader wouldn't do any of these things that they do.
can you imagine, like, you're a painter, you're a spiritual person, you meditate. Can you imagine 200 years after you died, if a bunch of people made a story about you that was the exact opposite of everything you believe in?
I know.
And made a religion about it. And then the only thing that could be worse than that would be for them to say, look, if you don't believe in our story, then you're going to go to hell for eternity. Holy cow. Can you imagine that if you don't believe in the opposite of what you believe in, there people representing you are saying that they're going to go to hell for eternity?
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Yeah. And you're
Use the
sitting up
common
there
sense.
watching this going, okay, how do I change it all? How do I balance the scale?
Well, the good news is that it's 2019 and not 1019 or
Yes.
1519, where spirituality is so prevalent in so many places.
It
You
is.
know,
And yet 2,000 years, there's still a war in the Middle East, right? They're still fighting each other in the name of what?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's what's so incredible to me. But I'm glad that you know, it's breaking news.
Hey, I'll tell you something. I'll tell you something from my own experience in this whole thing.
Yeah.
You have to understand, it took me probably 2 years after he and Mary Magdalena, Mother Mary, and Buddha and Krishna and Moses and all the ascended masters and archangels were appearing at my events. It took me 2 years for me to feel like I was letting him in to be my friend, because he was helping me out at my events. You know, him appearing to people and giving people healings or giving people beautiful experiences with their loved ones. You know, there's always tissues at my events for people who are just so touched emotionally,
Overwhelmed. Yeah.
or, you know, by having such a beautiful experience with Mother Mary or with Jesus or one of the other ascended masters. You know, it took me about 2 years for me to actually feel like I can call him my friend, because growing up Jewish, we weren't allowed to say his name in our house. You know, Jewish people have this "don't talk to me about Jesus" attitude, which I had the first 57 years of my life, or I'm 58, the first 55 years of my life. Okay. But I can tell you, he, there's a Jewish word that's called a mensch.
Yeah.
A mensch is a good man, an honorable, honest, good man. He's a mensch. He's a good man.
Yeah.
He always acts with integrity. Always. He always chooses love over everything. Over everything. And he never puts himself above anybody, because he's always trying to help people see their own divinity. A true master doesn't want you to look up to them. They don't want you to put them up on a pedestal, because if you put them up on a high pedestal, you don't feel worthy. And that's one of the basics in Christianity, is
Yeah.
that people are taught they're a sinner from their time they can read. Now, let me ask you something. I think that God, the ultimate being, is a loving being, and is a being that we should look at in love instead of look at in fear. Okay? Now, I think that God wants me to be happy. And in order for me to be happy, if I have a good self-image of myself, like all of us, I think we have a better chance of being happy, psychologically speaking, if we have a good self-image, okay? And if we love ourselves. So that means that anybody who's telling you that you are a sinner, so you feel bad about yourself, cannot be God. Because God knows that the only way we can do the most good in this life is by having a good self-image. Every psychologist in the world will tell you that.
Yeah, yeah.
Anybody telling you that you were born a sinner
I
is
think
not
all
looking out
organized
for you.
religion is kind of built around the idea, you know, it's all to keep everybody in line and you know, uh, doing what they need and what they want them to do. Mostly it's give me money. But you know, right now we're in the Jewish New Year. We're going into we're going for me, Yom Kippur was the scariest holiday ever. God's writing in his book when I'm going to die. You know, he's writing in this book. Like, I used to be
Believe me,
so scared as a child.
I grew up Jewish. I know the whole thing. Jewish people, you're supposed to beat yourself. You're supposed to punch yourself for all the horrible things you did that year, for all the sins you did that year. Whew.
Yeah.
I think God would prefer us that we love ourselves and not punch ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It used to be very scary. So, you know, Happy New Year, though, to anybody who's listening.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's absolutely amazing. I'm so glad that I got to meet you. And I just have to encourage everybody to at least experience your music. I mean, you play 2 recorders at the same time. And wow, what's up with that? Like, where did that come from? How did you
Well,
develop that technique?
I used to play one at a time like normal people, but in 1990, I ran out of money and I went down to Venice Beach to play my recorders on the beach, and I met a woman who played the harp. We made a tape that was called Celestial Winds. We sold 10,000 copies of that tape at Venice Beach over the following 2 years. And then 2 years after that, we had sold 100,000 CDs. So my original CDs were called Celestial Winds. And while I was playing at Venice Beach, I just developed, because we would play the same songs over and over, you know, the first year that we were playing together, and I got very bored doing that. And the only thing that was making it interesting for me was playing, you know, trying to play a second flute at one time. And I realized that when I play these 2 flutes at one time, the 2 notes create a third note, which is called a triharmonic tone. You can actually hear 3 notes when I'm only playing 2 notes because I only have 2 hands. Okay, that frequency is the frequency that people hear in heaven when they're in heaven, because everything in heaven is based on frequency and vibration. And the frequency that I create by playing those 2 flutes, which creates the third tone, the third frequency, that is a magical thing that affects people's souls. Because when we're in heaven, before this life, every night when we're sleeping and we don't realize we're in heaven, when we're meditating and we're connecting into the heavenly dimension, we're tapping into that frequency. And that frequency is like a catalyst for our soul that helps raise our soul to higher levels.
So how old were you when you first started to play?
Oh, I was in 3rd grade. I was 7.
So, but this kind of music, was this always part of you, or were you...
No, after a couple of years of playing the recorder in school, I became the youngest person ever in the New York Recorder Guild. It was a performing thing of classical musicians who played Baroque and Renaissance music. And I did that for about 4 years until I heard Jethro Tull. And once I heard Jethro Tull, that was the end of my classical career. And I started to play rock music on my flute. And then I became a lead guitar player in high school, and I traveled in rock bands all over the country for many years.
Wow.
And played with a lot of people who later became famous. And then when I was 30, I ran out of money. I was in California, and out of desperation, I went down to Venice Beach, and that's how I started playing this music. And I sold over 1 million CDs now. I had 2 Grammy nominations, and
Good for
every
you.
month,
Congratulations.
over 1 million people listen to my music every month. There's places like Johns Hopkins Medical Centers that have my music on 24/7 because they feel like it's the
Wow.
most healing music on the planet.
That's amazing. Good for you. I have one other question. In the book, you wrote that the number 9 was a number that was special for you. What was that all about?
Oh boy, that would be a whole 2-hour interview just about that. The number 9, what I ended up finding out after, it was repeating in my life like all the time. It's the number of completion. And humanity is coming to a point like a completion, because spirituality has always had to be hidden, because the religions didn't want spirituality to be accessible, because the only way a religion can survive is if people are guilted or feared into believing that if they don't do a certain path or read a certain book or follow a certain guy,
Right.
that they're going to hell forever. And a great part of humanity has grown out of that, where there's nothing that's going to convince you or me or most of your listeners that if we don't accept a certain guy in a certain book, that we're going to hell forever. And so it's a completion of this thousands of years of ignorance that people have lived in. I know that word ignorance is a powerful word, but I don't know what word describes it better. I mean, originally, people weren't even allowed to read the Bible. The only people who were allowed to read the Bible were the priests, because they wanted to keep people in the dark. And that darkness is ending. You know, there's 50 million Americans who are meditating or doing yoga or, pursuing their spiritual evolution, climbing that spiritual ladder. I call it the Oprah generation, because Oprah really opened the door to talk about spirituality in a common sense, logical, practical way where everybody can understand it. And so the number 9 has to do with this whole age of ascendance that we're living in, because so many people in the world are raising their vibration, climbing the spiritual ladder, and becoming spiritual beings while they're living in a physical body.
Okay, good to know. 9 is my number. I was born on the 9th, and you mentioned the 18. It was funny because I was born on the 9th. I had my son in birth room 18 on the 18th. And, of course, in Jewish, it's highest life, right? 18 is life.
Yeah,
So
well, 18 is the highest number. It's the best number in Judaism, which is a 9. 1 + 8 is 9.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, you've been a fascinating guest. I want to thank you so much for joining me today, David.
Thank you.
And I hope everybody who listens to this interview just finds it absolutely amazing and goes and gets the books, listens to your music. Tell us how we can get in touch with you.
Yep. Yeah, it's through davidyoungmusic.com, or you can go to Amazon.
Okay, excellent. Well, everybody, davidyoungmusic.com. Go there, or Amazon. Get yourself a copy of his music. And if you get a copy of this book, then you'll be able to download. There are instructions in the book how you can listen to the music and download it through this at the same time as you read, and it's really absolutely beautiful. Thanks again, David, for being my guest. Goodbye, people on Facebook. We're going to leave you, and I'm going to stop the live stream right now. And I'm going to come over. We've stopped that. I'm going to just stop our recording.